Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com.
All right, welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for Jenna. Guys, we have got a great show lined up for you today, and I hope that you will stay tuned to watch the entirety of it because we've got some great guests that are coming up, from Charles Marino to Josh Hammer to talk about Israel and Hamas. Charles Marino will be in to talk about crime. Also, we'll have Jim Nelles in to talk about the economy. But here's something that I do want to talk about, and obviously you have Michael Cohen coming back on the stand. Actually, that'll be tomorrow. And there's a lot of distractions, I think, that are taken away from some of the issues that are impacting Americans the most. And obviously, the economy being one of them, the border being another. What I would like to do in this segment is actually combine the two, and that is what's happening at the border, because I don't think we're hearing enough about it. What the left would like you to do is they would like you to believe that former President Donald Trump, and I'll get into this in the last block, they want you to believe that he's a criminal, while the left is turning our criminal system, our justice system, upside down, and nothing could be further from the truth. I'm not going to sit here and defend the former president and say some of the things that he did were moral, but they certainly were not illegal. But one of the reasons why the left wants you constantly harping on or distracted by Donald Trump in his personal life is because they simply don't want you paying attention to their policies. And so I've got a question to ask you, because it seems to me that this isn't getting the coverage that it deserves, definitely not in mainstream media. But how much are illegal aliens costing you? How much are they costing the American economy? And what are they doing to kind of change the fabric of America, to change our culture without the assimilation? I want to talk about this, and I want to delve into this just a little bit. AMAC had a fabulous column earlier in the week entitled "American Families Bear Financial Burden of Biden's Border Catastrophe." And make no mistake about it, this isn't a catastrophe. What Biden is looking for is what I would consider, hopefully that won't be anymore after November 5, but he's looking for a dependent vote, a dependency class, what I used to call on my radio show the new Negro vote. And it's something that the left constantly needs. They need a class of people that will constantly be dependent upon the federal government, and Biden is accomplishing this by keeping our borders wide open. They have no intention whatsoever of closing the border, but you've got to continue to pay for this. And we talk about the crime and all of those things, and that's true. We should talk about the crime that illegals are committing. We'll talk about actually later in the program with one of our guests about the terror threats that exist with Biden's open border. But how is this impacting you economically? All right. So the House GOP are actually considering legislation that will prevent illegals from voting in elections. Let's hope that they get that done. But Democrats are wanting to fund more illegal immigration. Yes, you heard me right. Right now, there are estimates, or I've heard estimates, is 6 million or 6.6 million, 8 million. I think the number is much larger. I believe, as the columnist from AMAC does, that you're probably looking at a number closer to 15 million if you include the getaways of illegals that have invaded or entered our country during Biden's tenure. You're talking about just in a span of the last 3.5 years. So this more than likely doubles the amount of illegal immigrants that have been in the country already. And if you can imagine, if Biden does win again, or even, I mean, there's rumors that this guy can't run. I don't know. But even if it's Kamala Harris, I suspect that you have an administrative state that are essentially running the Biden administration, if you will, and you can expect that those numbers will double or double again. All right. But I think the tide is starting to turn. More people are starting to pay attention to this. I think fewer people are are being distracted by Trump's court cases, if you will, which again is what the left wants us to focus on. And I think that's why you see a rise in the poll for President Trump. Now, listen, don't rest on your laurels just because you see the polls rising. People have to actually show up and vote. So you have to make sure that you vote early wherever there's ballot harvesting. If you're a conservative, be a part of that. Make sure that you show up on election day, but make sure that you show up early. Mail-in ballots, do whatever you have to do. But I really think this situation with Laken Riley, the young, beautiful lady, the University of Georgia student that was murdered by an illegal alien and just recently charged with her murder. I think people really started focusing or honing in, and I'm talking about the normies, if you will, on the border crisis. And they saw the crime, right? That woke them up to the crime, but now they're starting to recognize more things. I think more normies, if you will, are starting to wonder, what does this stuff cost us? Here's something that doesn't make the headlines. And again, that is the financial burden that's placed upon the American taxpayers. And I want to talk about that. There's some stats from FAIR. FAIR is the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And they talk about how the U.S. taxpayers are now shelling out at least $150 billion annually for illegals. All right. So figure that's greater than the annual GDP of 15 states and equivalent to more than 1.5 trillion over a 10-year budget window. Well, Carl, I mean, those numbers are so big, it's hard for me to comprehend what that number really means to me. Well, here's what you're paying. You're paying $956. $956 is what you're paying for each illegal alien, despite the fact that you're having a hard time paying your own bills, paying for your groceries, paying for your rent or your mortgage, your car note. Now you get to pay $956 for an illegal that's breaking the law, that's invading our country. And it's even worse in states like California, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. The taxes illegals pay, because you'll hear liberals say this all the time, well, listen, even if they're in the country, these people pay their taxes. Well, I got to tell you something. The taxes that illegals pay only cover about 17.2% of what they actually cost us. All right, when you consider the welfare programs that their children that are born into the United States become the benefactors of, 59%, listen to this stat, 59% of illegal immigrant households use one or more welfare programs. Illegal alien households, 59% use one or more of our welfare programs. What about Americans? 39%. Illegal aliens, 59%. Americans, 39%. $5.8 billion in food stamps, $1.6 billion from the Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. It simply does not stop. That's what it's costing you. This is Carl Jackson in for Jenna Ellis. We'll be right back.
Hi friends, Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing, and investments in gold and silver, and legacy precious metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you.
Hello and welcome back to Jenna Ellis. Tonight, I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for Jenna. She'll be back with you next week. Right now, I want to introduce you to my guest. His name is Charles Marino. He is the former DHS senior advisor. Also, he's the author of a new book. I want you guys to go out and get it. And if you happen to have a child or student that attends Harvard, make sure you give this book to them. It's called Terrorists on the Border and in Our Country. Charles, thank you so much for joining us today on Jenna Ellis Tonight.
Sure, Carl. Good to be with you.
All right, absolutely. Charles, listen, I got to talk to you. Obviously, the name of your book is Terrorists on the Border and in Our Country. Let's start there. Let's start with the borders, and then I want to talk about some of the crime that we're seeing right here inside of the United States as the Biden administration and the left claims that crime has been reducing under his administration, a complete and utter lie. But anyway, we'll get to that. But terrorists on the border and in our country, listen, I'm hearing estimates all the way from 6 million to 8 million to even 15 million illegal aliens that have entered the country, including gotaways since Biden took the helm. I don't understand why there's such a there's no fear. There seems to be no fear of a terrorist attack of any kind, not to mention that you have people coming into the country, third world countries sometimes, that are unassimilated, that may tend to be more violent. What are your concerns?
Yeah, all the above. And I think the American people are concerned about another act of terrorism taking place. I think they're finally sick and tired when it comes to the border crisis of being told what they're seeing and experiencing isn't happening by the administration, which is ridiculous. And I think officials within the government, especially on the law enforcement and intelligence side, will tell you this is exactly the issue that keeps them up at night each and every day. Now, look, we're encountering 180 different countries down in the southwest border, and many of these countries are what's known as special interest locations. That is, these are locations where we know terrorists and terrorist organizations are still thriving and in operation and planning against the United States of America. We also know that we've been infiltrated. We've been infiltrated by criminal aliens. We've seen examples of this all across the country. And we've also been infiltrated by those that have been on the terrorist watch list, in some cases roaming the country for over a year. This is unacceptable, and the cartels will openly work with terrorist organizations as long as they pay the price to get trafficked into the country.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I feel as though, and I thought Barack Obama was bad, former President Obama. I feel like we are witnessing an anti-American president. I mean, even Jimmy Carter. I realized Jimmy Carter was bad, horrible, frankly, from what I've read. But I don't think he was anti-American. I feel like Joe Biden is that. I'm looking at China and with using the Mexican cartels bringing fentanyl across our border. It's almost as if these. I'm really concerned about China. Let me put it that way, killing so many Americans. Let me get your take on that.
Well, you bring up a good point in going back and looking at past presidents. We do the same thing in the book. And I can tell you, when it came to securing the border and enforcing the immigration laws, we may not have always agreed how they went about it. But those two things were always a priority and played a significant role in their overall national security strategies. So in that way, you're exactly right, Carl. This administration is unprecedented in the way they have just walked away and abandoned their responsibilities to enforce either one of these. Look, you brought up former President Obama. He bared the nickname of the deporter in chief, which was given to him by the immigration advocacy groups because they thought he was deporting too many people at 450,000 a year. So this just goes to show that there's always been a level of enforcement because you needed a level of deterrence to prevent what we're seeing now from happening in the first place. So again, you're right. This administration is unprecedented in a lot of ways and none of them good.
Again, I'm speaking to Charles Marino. He is the author of Terrorists on the Border and in Our Country. Make sure that you go out and get the book. Another thing that I'm concerned about as it relates to crime, obviously, you see crime in blue cities. Muriel Bowser, the mayor of the mayor of Washington D.C., is under attack somewhat because people are saying, listen, the crime is just getting out of control in D.C. I don't know why it's taken them so long to figure that out, Charles. But the Biden administration says, listen, crime, we just hit a 50-year low when it comes to crime. Is there any truth to that?
Well, the statistics are a little flawed there. You do have some states and other locations that don't report their crime statistics in a timely manner to be included. And you have some states that don't submit at all. Also, there's a couple of other key factors here. We now have close to 15 million, as you alluded to, of an illegal population that is not inclined to report crimes for fear of deportation,
Great point.
even though under this administration they wouldn't have to worry about that. And also, we're seeing a lack of confidence in the American public to report crimes. Why? Because they don't think those that commit the crimes are going to be held to account by these liberal, radical prosecutors and district attorneys in these locations. Look, I have been calling for a very long time to outlaw sanctuary cities. And if that's not possible, if that's too big to achieve of a mission, then I say cut off their federal public safety grants. Look, you cannot give hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money to these cities when they have proven time and time again that they have no interest in providing for overall public security. I mean, it's a contradiction.
We only have 30 seconds left here, Charles, but sanctuary cities, it seems like an obvious and an easy solution, but Republicans have even been weak at this. Why? Why do you think that is?
Well, look, I think Congress across the board is earning their 7% approval rating, and I think both parties both parties need to get their acts together and get it together quickly. Again, Americans have no confidence in that body either, and rightfully so. But sanctuary cities are low-hanging fruit,
All right.
and House
We'll,
Republicans should
we'll
be
have to
able to
leave
take
it there.
action.
We'll have to leave it there, Charles. Go out and get the book, Terrorists on the Border and in Our Country. We'll be back.
Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows are just $25. My Pillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium My Pillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna.
Hello and welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Again, I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for Jenna. I'm glad to be joined now by Josh Hammer. He's the senior editor at large for Newsweek. And Josh is on with us to talk about what's happening, all the goings on, if you will, with Israel and Hamas and this whack or weak administration and Biden and how he's handling this thing. Josh, I got to tell you, I have never seen, I had never thought I'd see in American history, frankly. I thought Obama would be as bad as it would get. that we would see an American president that would turn their back on Israel so severely. There was an article earlier printed by PJ Media. Biden's betrayal of Israel is worse than we thought. We found out earlier this week that the Biden administration was literally holding out or holding on to intelligence or keeping it away from Israel, from the IDF, including where Hamas leaders are and where their underground command tunnels are, and not to mention withholding precision bombs from them, all the while complaining that they're concerned about civilian casualties. That's a mouthful, Josh, but I know you can handle it.
Yeah, no, a lot to unpack here, Carl. Let me first just talk about Joe Biden as an individual, and then I'll talk about this
Sure.
horrible news revelation. So, a lot of people say that Joe Biden is broadly pro-Israel. He likes to tell this story of how back when he was a very young junior senator from Delaware, he visited Israel back when Golda Meir was the prime minister. He talked about meeting her and being so impressed here. It's important to remind the viewers, Joe Biden was actually the senator who in 1982, so going back 42 years now to 1982, Israel bombed the Osirak nuclear facility in Iraq. This is back when Iraq was on the verge of nuclear weapons. And, the Reagan administration actually, along with most Western powers, basically told the Israelis, don't do this. Israel did it anyway. And it was then Joe Biden, who was still a fairly junior senator, who at that time threatened to withhold aid to Israel. This is 42 years ago. And it was at that time that the then prime minister of Israel, a guy by the name of Menachem Begin, who was actually the first Likud prime minister in Israeli history, the first conservative prime minister after 30 plus years of socialists, basically. It was then when Menachem Begin famously said to Joe Biden, "I am not a Jew with trembling knees." To this day, in the year 2024, it's one of the most famous lines in Israeli history. It was prompted by Joe Biden being anti-Israel 42 years ago. Wow. So, I hear a lot of talk about how Joe Biden is like a great friend, a lifelong friend. It's not true. Anyone who's ever looked at the history knows that it's not true. So that's why, turning to this new revelation, the fact that the U.S. is apparently withholding information about where the hostages are held, where Hamas is held. Well, first of all, where to begin here? One, there are 5 U.S. citizens at least still held hostage. There are American citizens being held hostage. There were approximately 25 to 35 Americans killed on October 7th. October 7th was obviously an act of war against Israel. Based on the casualty count, it was arguably an act of war against the United States itself. So is the U.S. withholding intelligence? When do we have this intelligence? Have they been withholding it since October, a week after the tragedy?
Right.
There's so many questions here. What Joe Biden is doing right now when it comes to abandoning U.S. citizens in those terror tunnels, Carl, I think that it's worse than immoral. It's worse than an impeachable offense. I think it's borderline treasonous, frankly.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I don't think that's hyperbole at all, Josh. I'm in agreement with you here. We don't even hear of these American hostages. It's absolutely insane. And I so appreciate you taking us back to the past there. I remember, for years I've argued that Joe Biden used to always claim that he was Lunchbox Joe, in touch with the middle class. And I'm like, has anybody ever checked this guy's voting record? He was like always one of the most liberal senators that there were inside of the Senate. I don't get how that moniker ever came to be, or why people or why people bought into it. But also, you see the Secretary of State, and it appears that they're walking things back now. It looks as though they're going to send the weaponry that Israel paid for, or that was paid for in this last spending bill to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. But Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made a really bold move yesterday while he was in Kyiv. Basically insulting Israel on your Memorial Day, Josh. This is could you ever even imagine this?
So this new story about the $1 billion in aid, Carl, unfortunately, it's not really as good as it looks. So first of all, this massive omnibus foreign aid bill it was $100 billion roughly, 60 of which was to Ukraine. It was nominally 25 or 26 billion to Israel. Now I think 8 or 9 was technically going to Gaza and Hamas. So even then, call it 15 billion to Israel. They're still only saying right now they're going to send 1 billion. But the real caveat, if you actually look at the timeline, that weapons and that money is not going to be sent for years from now. It's not like it's going to arrive tomorrow. So it's basically just a PR stunt by the Biden administration is basically my conclusion here. If you actually read between the lines here, it's just a continuation of the Biden administration's incessant desire to try to speak out of both sides of its mouth, try to make everyone happy. And Carl, as you know, and as I've learned from experience, when you try to make everyone happy too often, you run the risk of actually making exactly no one happy. And that's what the Biden campaign is doing right now.
I mean, I gotta ask this question here, Josh. Again, I'm speaking to Josh Hammer, senior editor at large for Newsweek. Is it possible that this administration is just an anti-Semitic? I mean, I can't think of any. I know he's placating to the base in Michigan. I get that, but that's a small amount of voters. I almost feel like they can go out and campaign and make up for those voters. The only logical conclusion that I could come to is that Biden or his administration hates the nation of Israel.
You know, the tragedy, Carl, is that the Biden administration, like the Obama administration before it, has a lot of prominent Jewish officials who tragically, I'm Jewish, I'm allowed to say this stuff. I mean, it's tragic that they are involved in many of these decisions. So Anthony Blinken is closely related to many Holocaust survivors. He has been abysmal. He has been an absolute shanda, a disgrace, we would say, to the Jewish people. Robert Malley was the lead negotiator on the Iran nuclear deal for Barack Obama. He has been the Iranian special envoy for Joe Biden. By the way, his security clearance was suspended last summer. We're still not entirely sure why, but Robert Malley is Jewish as well. So unfortunately, the rot even goes to the Jewish officials across the Obama and Biden administrations here. Look, does Joe Biden personally harbor an animus for the Jewish people in his heart? I would say probably not, but I've never met the man. I mean, I couldn't exactly tell you here. What I can tell you is that the Biden administration, because it's currently being led by a senile octogenarian who's not actually calling in the shots, it is being led by a radical tail of Gen Z and millennial staffers, especially on the campaign side, who are deep in the bowels of far-left Twitter and other social media, and they are steering him in a very radical direction that is wholly untethered, by the way, to the will of the American people, who, thank God, still overwhelmingly support Israel in its righteous and defensive war against Hamas.
Man. All right, Josh Hammer, man, good stuff. We'll have to leave it there. Senior editor at large for Newsweek. I wanted to talk about Harvard and the pro-terrorists there, but we're simply out of time. We'll be back. More Jenna Ellis tonight in just a few.
Hi, friends. Jenna Ellis, host of Jenna Ellis Tonight, and we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an utter disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a constant issue. High interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, and those have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even among the tensions. So there are so many reasons that Americans should consider wise investing, and investments in gold and silver, and legacy precious metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, download the free investor guide, and I have read it. There is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is the time to not roll the dice on your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that is in gold and that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals and make sure to tell them that I sent you.
All right, welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Again, I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for Jenna Ellis. You can find me on social media, all things social media, at The Carl Jackson Show. I'm joined now by my guest, Jim Nelles. He's an economist, Navy veteran, and a journalist. Jim, welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight.
Hey, Carl. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the breaking news for the day. Inflation has increased 3.4% in April from the same point in time last year. Give us your take on that. More Americans, I believe, are feeling the pinch and are starting to direct this or understand that it's Joe Biden's fault.
Yeah, Bidenomics is failing miserably. So if you look at the April 2024 numbers, 3.4% inflation increase, right? Not 3% inflation, 3.4% inflation increase. And we have to remember, inflation is additive. So when you have the 3.4% in April 2024 to the 4.9% in April 2023, that means over the last 2 years, we've seen prices go up by 8.3%. Overall, since Biden took office in 2021, prices are up by nearly 20%. Americans, especially working Americans, are feeling this because the majority of the increase has been in what I call the basket of needs: housing, gas, and food. And that's what's killing working Americans right now.
All right. Well, speaking of housing, there's a headline: U.S. home prices have surged 47%. Jim, you and I both know this. I think most Americans know this. You buy a home, that's your goal, that's your dream. That's part of the American dream. You want to buy a home, you want that house to increase in value. You want that equity to either when you sell your home, or perhaps you want to invest in in another property. But you're talking about people that are literally being priced out of the market. 47% increase. I mean, I'm thinking of kids that may have graduated college, maybe they got some jobs. I think the average salary now is like $60K or something like that for college graduates, and they're like, oh cool, I'll save for a couple of years, and then they get to save and they're like, oh man, housing is still going up insanely.
Well, here's the problem too. It's not just housing, it's rent. So even if you decide to rent while you try to save money for housing, you're depleting all of your savings with rent. And if you look at what's happening in the economy right now, Americans have depleted their entire savings accounts that they had during the pandemic. So we had about $2.1 trillion of savings in the United States during the pandemic. That is no longer there. People have spent that. People have maxed out their credit cards. They're now paying 25% on their credit cards, which they can no longer afford. We are seeing record numbers of foreclosures on housing. And the other thing that we're starting to see, Carl, is we are seeing record numbers of people back out of buying houses because they realize that they can no longer afford the house. So the housing market is a disaster. The only reason we are not back to where we were in 2008 through 2010 with the housing crisis is because people no longer have these variable rate mortgages. More than about 80% of Americans are locked in at mortgage rates of less than 5%. That's why no one is selling, and that's why you're seeing the price of housing increase. But the other story behind the price of housing, as well as the price of cars, is that the interest rates are skyrocketing, and people can not just afford the house, but they can't afford the interest that they're going to have to pay on the house. It reminds me of when my parents were buying a home in the late 70s and having to pay 18% interest on a home. That's insane. We haven't seen that since the late 70s, and people just can't afford it. That's why you see even successful children living in the basement of their parents' home because they can't afford either an apartment or to buy a house.
You know what, Jim, I got to tell you this quick story, and I'd like to get your response to it. So recently, I had a car that I was driving, and it got dinged up. A Domino's pizza delivery driver ran into my car, oddly enough, but it was an older model. It was a nice car, convertible, and I used it for weekend driving and driving to the studio and so on. I went to try to purchase the same car, and I got this car at I'm talking about basement prices. I couldn't afford to buy the same car a few years later, even though it was a car that was 12 years old, Jim, because of inflation and the price increase for cars. This is insane. And I'm thinking, if I can't do it, how much more a kid coming out of college or graduating from high school, so on, et cetera.
I think that goes back to the point that we saw Don Jr. make a few months ago, where he said, I took my kids to McDonald's, and as a son of a billionaire, when I notice how expensive McDonald's is, you have to realize that working Americans are getting killed. And again, it's not just the price of the vehicle. We've actually seen vehicle prices come down, both new and used cars, but because of the increased interest rates, the monthly payments have gone up significantly. So, and that actually falsely lowers the rate of inflation because the price of vehicles is included in the inflation rate, but not the interest rate, so not the monthly payment. So we see the price of cars come down, which everyone says, yay, the inflation rate's coming down. But then when you add the interest rate on top of that, people can't afford to buy the car, they can't afford to buy the house, they can't afford to do anything. And again, I want to come back to the credit card thing, because people are using credit cards now not to go on vacation, not to buy new TVs, not to do anything fun. They're using their credit cards to pay their rent, to pay their utilities, and to pay for food. And then they're paying 25% interest on that on a monthly basis. And that's what's driving so many Americans to start missing their payments. In 2023, we saw 18% of middle income Americans missing one of their debt payments. Millennials are getting their cars repossessed. Again, as I mentioned, foreclosures are happening. It's really insane. I've never seen the economy like this before, where the macro number looks good, the stock market keeps going up, but if you look at the micro numbers and you start understanding what's happening to working families, they are getting killed on a daily basis.
All right, a couple more points. We just have over a minute left here, Jim. But Biden basically inadvertently admitted that Trump's China tariffs were a good thing. He's doubling them in some cases. I want to get your take on that. Also, Red Lobster is closing down lots of locations, more jobs that are going to be lost. Is there any way Biden can turn this around before the election?
There is no way Biden can turn this around because his philosophy is all wrong. His policies are positive for inflation. He wants to pump trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy, and that's what causes the inflation. Look at Red Lobster going out of business and closing all those stores. Red Lobster is a blue-collar restaurant. It's a place for blue-collar people to go and try to have a nice seafood meal. They can no longer afford to do so. That's why Red Lobster is gone. We are going to see this happen more and more. One other quick point. There is a new study out that working Americans are actually skipping meals. 39% of Americans are skipping meals to make ends meet. This is America, and that is happening today. We need to bring Trump back into office, and we need Trump's economic policies to get the economy roaring again, and we need to get rid of Biden and Bidenomics because they have failed miserably.
10 seconds, Jim. If we don't get rid of Biden, what do you predict will happen? 10 seconds, quickly.
We are going to see stagflation. We're going to see inflation and no growth in the economy and more unemployment. It's going to look like Jimmy Carter era circa 1977, 1978.
All right, Jim Nelles, thank you so much. This is Carl Jackson in for Jenna Ellis. We'll be back in a few. All right, hello and welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Again, I'm your guest host, Carl Jackson, sitting in for Jenna Ellis. You can subscribe to my podcast wherever you go to get your podcast, The Carl Jackson Show. Also, follow me on all things social media at The Carl Jackson Show. X, Instagram, Facebook, True Social, Getter, wherever I am, The Carl Jackson Show. Guys, here's what I'd like to do because I want to talk about Trump's trials or his cases, if you will. And I will do that in just a sec. But also what I'd like to do is just recap how the Biden administration is absolutely destroying your lives and making your lives miserable. Some more and more people, I believe, are starting to realize this. There's no doubt that the normies exist. That aren't paying as much attention to politics right now, but they feel the impact of the economy every time they go to the grocery store or they fill up for groceries. And obviously, we talked about the economy with my last guest, Jim Nelles, and he brought up some great points, but we've seen the Biden administration admit that Trump's tariffs on China were a good thing because they're not only did they maintain the policy, but now they're expanding on the policy. This as China continues to make inroads, even with EVs, selling an EV that is so cheap, they are starting to outpace us on selling cars around the globe. Also, inflation. All of these things are things that we need to consider, things that we need to be talking about as conservatives, because I think these are the things that are going to grip the hearts and minds of everyday Americans. This is something that isn't, these issues, especially when it comes to the economy, it isn't a Republican issue. It isn't a Democrat issue. It is an American issue. It is an issue that is touching every single household. And again, you've seen home prices surge 47%. One of the things we talked about. We've seen the Biden administration abandon our greatest ally in the Middle East, and that is Israel. They don't want them to fight the war and essentially elongating the war, making it even worse. Obviously, more civilians will be killed the longer this thing drags on. And quite frankly, Israel has one of the best tactics in the well, I wouldn't say the best tactics, but I would say when it comes to engaging in war, you can't find a more diplomatic country in a sense than Israel, where they'll literally send these knock-knock bombs on buildings to tell people to get out of the way while they're trying to kill their enemies. War is just a horrific thing, and civilians are going to be killed. But perhaps, if the UN, if the Biden administration are so concerned about civilians being killed in Gaza, maybe they should allow Israel to get rid of Hamas. The people that are really killing the most people in Gaza. I mean, it's just absolutely insane to me. And then we get the open borders. I told you earlier how we're literally paying about $956 or something to that effect each for the illegal aliens that are coming into this country. More illegal aliens are on our welfare system than United States citizens. This is absolutely insane to me. And then also, what we're dealing with, and I think why you're starting to see Trump rise in the polls, is simply because Americans, at their core, understand that they're Americans. They understand at their core the rule of law. It's almost innate when you're born into this country. So they see the unfairness of what's happening with Trump, and people get it. People on the left, people on the right, people get it. I mean, you're seeing CNN, you're seeing MSNBC hosts that are literally saying, Fareed Zakaria on CNN is saying that, listen, if this wasn't Trump, I don't think these cases would exist. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but you have 5 civil and criminal cases against the man, former President Donald Trump. And guys, this isn't just about Trump. This is about us. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. If they can do this to him, this guy's a billionaire. This guy's been the president of the United States. Imagine what they can do to you. Well, actually, some people don't have to imagine. You have J6ers that are already serving time in prison, while you can get these riots on college campuses by pro-Hamas terrorists, and nothing happens. You've got Harvard terrorists, these pro-Hamas little wannabes that where you had the Harvard administration ceding to their demands. But I got to tell you again, I think people understand the rule of law is what makes this country exceptional. The rule of law, first and foremost, is why people flock to this country besides the job opportunities, the economic opportunities. But people understand that Trump is being hosed, and they understand that if they can go after him, they can go after us. And I think this is why it's starting to backfire on the left. I'm not saying that this issue is going to take Trump all the way to the White House, but I think the longer this trial goes on, frankly, any of these cases, and even if he's convicted in this hush money or this non-disclosure agreement case, I don't think it hurts the man. Frankly, I think it helps him because everyone realizes that this is a sham. Just consider this. All that people are seeing is this is a continuation of the 8 years of Get Trump movement, whether it's the Russia collusion hoax, whether it's withholding the Hunter Biden laptop information from American voters. And we know by exit polling that if more Americans had heard of, more voters had heard of the the Hunter Biden laptop, despite what the 51 intelligence authorities said, claiming that it was Russian disinformation, if the voters would have heard about this, Trump would be in the White House today. And then you look at all of these cases, E. Jean Carroll, where this lady is awarded millions and millions of dollars with no evidence that any assault ever occurred, and the lady is kooky as all get out, if I can just be clear. You have this Alvin Bragg situation where the statute of limitations has run out on a non-disclosure agreement. This guy trumps up this federal election law against the former president of the United States, even though he's in a district courtroom, which makes no mistake. You have Letitia James and Judge Engoron that don't understand how property is valued, that you have a victimless crime there. Americans see this. You have Fani Willis, who goes after Trump for election integrity issues. Meanwhile, she's having an affair with the special prosecutor and living off the taxpayers' money. You have Jack Smith with the Mar-a-Lago case, who is really concerned about prosecuting Trump before the November election. He isn't going to get that chance. Meanwhile, as far as equal justice is concerned, Robert Hur didn't prosecute Biden over classified documents because he's out of his mind. Tara Reade is looked at as a joke, even though she claims to be have been sexually assaulted by Trump. Stacey Abrams said she won Georgia. She's not under criminal indictment. Hillary Clinton was fined $100K for her 2016 shenanigans. Obama fined $375K for his. That's it, guys. Unjust. It's unjust. Carl Jackson in for Jenna Ellis. Don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.